Welcome to Agatha Christie She Watched, our spoiler-heavy look at the movie and TV adaptations of the mystery genre's greatest writer. I'm Bill Peschel of Peschel Press, publishers of the annotated novels of Agatha Christie, and today we're talking about drones, ghosts, secret cameras, and Sherlock Holmes. We are talking about And Then There Were None, the 2017 adaptation that appeared on Japanese television in 2 parts. But first, let me introduce my partner in marriage as well as crime of the fictional kind, Teresa Peschel. Teresa, how are you doing today?
Hi, Bill, and I'm not really feeling at my best. I have a terrible cold. Our son brought it home from college and shared it with all the rest of us, and your time will come.
I've been feeling it, too, as I was doing that introduction. I'm going, this is just not as sound as smooth as I usually do.
But we will do our best, folks, because it was a really stellar adaptation of And Then There Were None. This is the 7th one that we have seen, starting with the 1945 film, which was really amazing, but that was, like the majority of the adaptations, that was of the stage play, which means that at the end you discover that Vera is innocent, and so was, well, Philip Lombard may not have been innocent, but that wasn't Philip Lombard, that was his friend filling in for him. But we saw that version. We saw a kinescope version from 1959 where they compacted all of the action down to 1 hour and managed still to do it. And that one was a little bit more like the novel because it was actually Philip Lombard, and Vera had more of a tragic past. Then a 1965 version with Hugh O'Brien, which involved a lot of gratuitous nudity and totally ridiculous gratuitous nudity. A 1974 version where they managed to de-sex Oliver Reed and de-sex Elkie Summer, and I would not have believed you could de-sex and make Oliver Reed boring, but they managed. A 1989 version with Frank Stallone set in the African jungle, and what a mess, folks.
When you say Frank Stallone is the best part about the movie, that tells you about the rest of the movie, although he really did try to acquit himself. He really did a game job at it.
The script did a terrible job on that. It was a great setting. They could have really had fun with all of the Tarzan, Lost in the Jungle movie tropes with quicksand and poisonous snakes that constrict you into jelly and hordes of screaming natives throwing spears at you. And no, they could have been in a hotel in Cape Town. And Brenda Vaccaro was in that mess, too, and so was Donald Pleasance, and I guess the check cashed. And then that was it And Then There Were None for a while, and then we saw the Sarah Phelps version. Now, I want to point out that the first 5 adaptations that we saw were basically of the stage play. For those of you who have never actually read Agatha Christie and think that she's a sweet old lady who wrote sweet, cute cozies, read And Then There Were None, and it is absolutely nihilistic. All of these people are bad people, and they all deserve what happened to them, every last one of them, with the possible exception of Mrs. Rogers, because she was clearly an abused wife.
But each one of them is trapped, hunted down, and killed.
Exactly, exactly. And that is not a cozy writer. Believe me, I've seen enough cozies.
Yeah, this is something like reading Silence of the Lambs and thinking, what is wrong with you? Silence of the Lambs was written in like the mid-40s, you know.
Exactly. She published it in 1939, and she rewrote it as a play. And when she rewrote it as a play, she changed the ending to make Vera and Philip Lombard fall in love and escape with their lives because, as it turns out, they weren't guilty of what they had been accused of. And I didn't see how anybody could adapt the novel because in the novel, everybody dies. And then at the end, you have 2 epilogues, one where the police arrive on the island and have absolutely no idea what is going on, and they're trying to backtrack and figure it out. And then the second epilogue is when a fishing trawler turns in a message in a bottle to Scotland Yard, and it is Judge Wargrave's last words. It is his statement as to what he did and why he did it. And I just didn't see how that could be adapted. The play is easy. Plays are essentially movies to take place on a stage. But Sarah Phelps managed to do it, and she did it really well. This is the 2015 adaptation. And now here we are at the 2017 Japanese adaptation, and once again, they did the novel. And they actually stuck very closer in many ways than Sarah Phelps did, to the novel, because the police show up. Okay, we see it as a police procedural, occasional moments where you see the police trying to figure out what's going on and backtracking. But as in the novel, but you saw this in the stage play, I'm guessing, having never seen the stage play, the previous versions all showed you the judge seducing the doctor to get the doctor on his side. They showed you that dance as the judge tries to persuade the doctor to come around to his way of thinking, to be his ally in figuring out what's actually going on. You never see any of that here. You never, ever see the doctor and the judge speaking together by themselves.
Actually, there is, at the very, very, very end, and we'll have to get into the structure of this first so that the audience can understand, but there was a brief scene. It was shot from the window looking in, and it was the judge talking to the doctor, but there was nothing like this long dance.
Yes, the dance was not there that I've seen in 6 previous adaptations. And the other thing that they did that is right out of the novel, Vera hangs herself never knowing that the judge was behind it all. And if you've seen the various other versions, the judge reveals himself, and the judge revealed himself to Vera in the Sarah Phelps version, not in the novel. In the novel, Vera is alone, and she is faced with the fact that she shot Philip Lombard to death, and she is almost in a fugue state, and she marches back into the hotel and up the stairs and into her room, and there's the noose waiting for her, and she's thinking about Hugo and Cyril. She murdered Cyril so that she could marry Hugo after he inherited all of Cyril's money, and Hugo wasn't having none of that. She knows she's guilty. She got off, but Hugo knew she was guilty, and she is so overcome with guilt. She's just despairing, and she walks up to the noose and she hangs herself, and she never knows that the judge manipulated her. You do not ever see Vera confront Justice Wargrave, ever. You never see that. And then you move back to the police procedural, and in a way they combined the two epilogues in one, because you have the police all over the island, and then you have Detective Shokokuji working it out as to what happened. And you wrote in your review on the Instagram page, we have an Instagram account, folks, by the way, if you want to look for it, look for Peschel Press. And you mentioned that the way that Inspector Shokokuji discovered what was going on, you said Sherlock Holmes and Thor Bridge. Now, I recognize the name. I know who Sherlock Holmes is, but I don't know Thor Bridge. I assume that's one of the stories. So would you clarify what you meant by that, because I have no idea.
Absolutely. But first, let's go into a little bit about the episode itself, because this is 3.5 hours long.
And it moved along smartly.
It moved along smartly, although I think also in some points they really dug out here are the bodies and here's who they are. I think they did the roll call of the dead at least 3 or 4 times throughout. The movie opens with the boat with the police going out to the island, and there's Detective Shokokuji as well at the head, and we've met him before in the Great Actress Murder Case, which we discussed in a previous episode. He's sort of a Poirot-like figure, except he's very rigid. He makes the rest of the Japanese public look like emo boys and girls compared to the stone face robotic movements that this guy moves under. But he's also very brilliant, and they swarm the island, and they're talking about there are 10 bodies there, so they already told you, basically, they told you how this all turns out. And then they jump to the beginning of the story. And then when it comes time at the end of the first episode, they go back to the police, and then the police are reintroduced at the beginning of the second episode, where the rest of the inhabitants are killed. And then we have Detective Shokokuji actually investigating the case. Okay, part of what he has to do is figure out what actually happened, and one of the clues that he notices is that he sees the judge, who is dead in a chair covered with a sheet with a blood stain in the middle of it, but no bullet wound. There's no bullet wound through the sheet, and there's no gun. It makes it look like he was like victim number 6, I believe, wasn't he?
The judge, to all appearances, was victim number 6. So the judge wouldn't be shot through the sheet if he was victim number 6.
Yeah, the sheet was put on afterwards.
The sheet was put on afterwards.
So he looks, and also his corpse is more decomposed than the others, so they're assuming he was shot. He was one of the first victims, and Shokokuji says, nope, that's not right. He's looking at the scene in the bedroom, and there was remains of a huge fire built into the fireplace. The sheet is over him, and he's having to look around, and he figures it out. There are wax dots up in the ceiling, which was used to hold part of the sheet that eventually covers him. And they find outside the window, they find a pile of bricks, they find the gun, and he concludes that what the judge did was he wrapped a rope made of kelp around the gun, the handle of the gun, and attached the other end to a couple of bricks that he hangs outside the window. He shoots himself, lets go, the gun pulls out of his hand and out the window and then down. And as he points out later, mice came through and ate the kelp because kelp is delicious. It's seaweed.
It's seafood.
So all they have to go on is a pile of bricks outside and the gun. Well, in the Sherlock Holmes story, The Adventure of Thor Bridge, there is a case in which this woman is found dead at one end of the bridge. She is shot to death, and there's no clues except for a little bit of chipped stone on the bridge itself. And Sherlock works out that she had shot herself intending to frame the mistress, the governess, who was having an affair with the master, or she assumed was having an affair with her husband. And they looked over the side of the bridge, and they found in the creek the gun with the rope all still attached to it. And she had done exactly the same thing. In fact, I think it was stretched. There was almost like a rubber band to it. It hit the bridge, chipped off a little bit of stone, went over the side and into the stream. Exactly the same way that the judge kills himself in this.
Wow, okay. So there's a little touch of Sherlock Holmes in there.
Yes, which was not done in any of the other episodes. They did other things to upgrade it for modern sensibilities. Remember, because we have now cell phones, tablets.
Oh, yes, and all of the cell phones were taken away because this was a getting back to nature hotel, despite the presence of electricity, but they didn't want to get that far back from nature. So you had to remove all of your high-tech devices, and then when they're taken out of the safe, the batteries have all been removed, which means that they are essentially little plastic bricks. There's no contact with the outside. Only newspapers are delivered every 4 days by drone. In the novel, when the police do the post-mortem, this is why it didn't really matter in the novel. You could build all the bonfires you want and flash signal lights out at sea all you want. But the inhabitants of the nearest land mass had all been instructed, this is a game that we're playing, so please don't pay any attention to what it is that we're doing. If you see SOS fires or something like that, pay no attention. The previous owner of Indian Island had been an American millionaire who held huge, riotous parties. And the ladies in the village on the other side of the Sound who went over and cleaned up afterwards came back with lots and lots of stories about dissipated behavior, and everybody knew on the mainland that anything went at those island parties. So they were already primed not to pay attention.
And also, by the way, I looked up the name of the island. This is Soldier Island, Heitai, which is...
so soldier. That does mean soldier.
It does mean soldier, which of course is kind of obvious now that I think about it, because the poem is, instead of 10 little Indians, it's 10 little soldiers, and it was a song, not a poem. But that they had to change things around for this, of course.
Yes, another change that they made, this being Japanese culture, you wouldn't expect to have hyper-fundamentalist, puritanical spinsters, and so Emily Brent became an actress again. And I've seen... But Emily Brent is the 5th person to die, and in the novel she is the absolute worst example of a Christian you can find, someone who would cheerfully hang Jesus or burn him at the stake because, my God, he associated with prostitutes and tax collectors. How dare he? You don't often get a really good view in the movies of her, and in some of the film adaptations they turned her into an actress. Sometimes she has a lesbian lover, and sometimes it was her husband. But this one, you get the actress, the famous actress, which we saw in some of the previous film versions. But it wasn't her husband, and it wasn't her lesbian lover that she killed. It was, as with the original Emily Brent, it was the serving maid. She had a housekeeper, young and pretty, who turned out to be pregnant. In the novel, Emily Brent throws that girl out onto the streets because she's certainly not going to show Christian charity to some poor girl who is pregnant and has no husband and is going to be at a loss of what to do next and what's going to happen to that poor baby. And so Emily Brent's maid drowns herself. Well, here, she takes the girl into the doctor, and she claims that she's doing one thing and tells the girl one thing, but she and the doctor give the girl a forced abortion. And when the housekeeper discovers that her baby, which she wanted, had been killed, she had been murdered, she was just hugely distraught, and she committed suicide. So you swing back to the original novel. But instead of a miscarriage or a pregnant girl drowning herself, it's almost like two separate deaths, the abortion and then the suicide.
And then at the very end, instead of the judge throwing a message in a bottle and tossing it into the sea, Inspector Shokokuji discovers hidden cameras all over the house and all over the island. And they're able to piece together from the memory cards what actually happened.
The judge wanted them to know, that he wanted to challenge them. He didn't want to make it easy. He wanted them to know. And in fact, it fits in perfectly with Judge Wargrave's personality in the novel. And it also fits in with Inspector Shokokuji's diagnosis. That's not the right word. His
interpretation.
His interpretation of the facts.
Right.
This is a murderer who is taunting us, who wants to show us how clever he is, and he is going to make this puzzling for us. If we can't solve the puzzle, we fail. If we can solve the puzzle, and he's not going to make it easy for us, but there are going to be clues waiting for us. I really did kind of wonder what kind of a search the police did, that they weren't lifting up the valances on the drapes and finding little hidden cameras behind them, because all you have to do, once you found the first hidden camera, and that one wasn't that hard to find, he saw that there was, the inspector saw there was a little brown ribbon over a hole in the valance in the main room, and he looked at that and went over and lifted it up, and what do you know, the little brown bows represent a hidden camera, and they found them all over the place. But it still seems to me that it wouldn't have been one of the police who was busy flipping things over, because the police know where criminals hide things. There aren't that many places that you are going to look at things like this, especially when you have 10 bodies and the majority of them are of important, well-known people. The judge, the doctor, the Olympic swimming star, the budding mystery writer, the member of parliament,
the military commentator.
The military commentator, the former member of the Tokyo Police Department. They're not homeless people that serial killers normally go for. They're not street prostitutes where nobody cares. Every one of these people has friends and relatives who would get worked up about them being gone and would want to know what happened.
Well, I would also say in the defense of the police, they didn't know at first they were looking for They didn't know they were checking for cameras, though, because they did find, the inspector did find the remains in the fireplace of a remote control for a camera.
So where's the camera that this remote control is for?
Right. But once they found that it was going to be a brown ribbon and it was this size, then they could start to search in earnest for it. And they found everything except the last one, which was embedded in the ceiling.
And as with all of the previous adaptations, the judge was dying. He wanted to satisfy his urge, punish people who had gotten away with it. And he made some mistakes in here, which I have not seen in other adaptations.
Like what?
The Detective Bloor.
Yeah.
Detective Bloor did lie on the stand, but we saw a scene why Detective Bloor lied on the stand. It wasn't for personal gain. It wasn't for money. He lied on the stand because the defendant beat his wife.
Hard enough that she was dying, even though she wasn't in a hospital. But
she wasn't in a hospital. She was seriously beaten up. Any policeman would probably be able to tell you the next time he went after her, she wouldn't live through it. Detective Bloor resigned soon after, but that's something that Justice Wargrave didn't know. And he also didn't know that Philip Lombard, the soldier who abandoned his men at the battlefield, had his daughter by a local woman try and rescue him, and he went off with his daughter, and that's kind of really hard.
Well, and that was also very strange because they were fighting guerrillas somewhere. It was some Soviet
Think of
state.
Elbonia. They were in some Elbonians. They were in Elbonia.
They were in Elbonia, and he had 5 men left, and they were all in cover. She drives up in the Jeep, and he leaps in and looks behind him, and a rocket hits them, and they're all injured on the ground. And I don't know, and the troops were coming towards him.
And what are you going to do? And that's really kind of gray, because if he stayed, his daughter would have been dead. But if he left, he saved his daughter at least. That's a difficult decision. That's a snap decision you make. It's not the same as your typical Philip Lombard move where you cheerfully abandon your men in the desert or in the jungle or wherever you are. You abandon them to die, knowing that you might have been able to save them. This was more difficult.
In a battlefield situation, unless you're trained to respond in a certain situation, this is not something you train for. See your men, some of them are wounded on the ground and they're being approached by men with guns. Now, yes, maybe you could tell your daughter to back up the car, back up towards them and lay down some covering fire with your sole rifle. And maybe you might be, and then jump out and help them into the car, into the open car, and then pull
in the battlefield and then pull away. And I don't know. It made it a little grayer.
Yeah.
It made Philip Lombard's backstory a little bit more gray than it was in any other version we have seen. And it made Detective Bloor's backstory, his again, was a little grayer, a little more nuanced than any other version we have seen. And I thought that was really a nice touch. It was very interesting to see that.
That is, and that's one of the things to talk about here is the role of justice, especially when it turns into revenge, and also why you shouldn't necessarily want the death penalty for some situations. And it's hard to say unless you're there. How can you tell? And who are you to determine who lives and who dies?
Who are you to judge? Who are you to judge? Now, I'll agree, as with the novel and as with the Sarah Phelps version, Vera was guilty, guilty, guilty. She knew that child would drown, and she sent him out anyway, because she wanted what she wanted, and he didn't matter. Most of these people, they were guilty, guilty, guilty. We'll call him General Maxwell. He was the member of Parliament who sent his wife's lover off to die. He feels guilty. He feels intensely guilty. The actress, not so much. She was doing the right thing, whether anyone else would agree. The doctor felt guilty over murdering a patient on the operating table because she was drunk, and she says specifically to herself, she never drank again. She stopped.
That was like 15 years ago?
Yeah, she changed her life because of that. She made herself into a better person, but she's still being punished for it.
Right. Whereas the Sarah Phelps version, the doctor was still a drunk. He was a drunk then, and he was a drunk now, and God knows, how many
other patients he killed on the operating table. Oh, something else that I thought was a really interesting change. In the novel, Philip Lombard, he notices Vera. How could he not? She's the only young, pretty woman on the island. There's Mrs. Rogers, who is a beaten-down cook, and Emily Brent, who is a dried-up old spinster. He's not going to see either of them as women, but he sees Vera Claythorne, and why not? She's hot. But they don't really do anything about it. Then in all of the plays, Vera and Philip Lombard fall in love and escape, to the point of having gratuitous nudity. I'm thinking of the 1965 Hugh O'Brien one. We get to see a lot of Vera in her underwear, racing about and falling into bed with Hugh Lombard at the first opportunity. And I'm thinking, no, that would never happen. Not even with Hugh O'Brien at his prime. Sorry, it's not going to happen. And then we see the Sarah Phelps one. I do not consider it to be gratuitous nudity.
To see Philip Lombard.
See Philip Lombard wearing nothing but a towel. He's showing off for Vera and he showed off for me. But this version, the Philip Lombard character, is considerably older. He's more experienced, and you never get any of that sexual tension between him and Vera. Instead, what you get is Vera with the Tony Marsden character, who is the budding mystery writer who was an amateur boxer and killed someone in a drunken street brawl. I thought that character, when we were meeting him and he was coming over on the boat and he was flirting up a storm with Vera on the boat, I thought he was going to be the Philip Lombard character, and I was wrong. They went right back to what the novel had, as opposed to the other 6 filmed versions that we have seen.
For 3.5 hours, it did move fairly quick. Like I said, I think the roll call of the dead happened, several times, a couple of times too many. But at the same time,
but remember, we were seeing 4 episodes squeezed together.
Well, it was 2 episodes, but they were 2-hour-long chunks that I found on the Daily Motion website.
I would watch this again, but my only wish is that TV Asahi, who are the producers of this, they should make this available in a really beautiful, cleaned-up version for streaming or on DVDs, because I think that any Agatha Christie fan should see this. Just like every Agatha Christie fan would probably really enjoy their other 2 productions, the 450 from Paddington, which we cannot find, and The Great Actress Murder Case, which was a remake of The Mirror Cracked. And again, that was a fabulous episode with Inspector Shokokuji, and I would really like to see good, clean copies. The Poirots, we were able to watch Appointment with Death.
Yeah, that's Mansai Nomura playing Poirot.
Yes, we were able to see 2 of those, but we couldn't find Murder on the Orient Express. And that was Fuji TV, and I would really like to see them. And again, Fuji TV should make them available on DVD for the English-speaking market, because there are lots of Agatha Christie fans who would really enjoy them. They are wonderful. They are worth seeking out.
You're leaving money on the table, folks.
Yeah, exactly. Leaving money on the table. This worked fabulously well. I think it all held together, and it was surprisingly close to the novel. Closer in many, many ways than the Sarah Phelps version, and I like the Sarah Phelps version. Now, she did spend more time showing you how crazy everyone was going, but so did this. This one showed just as much how crazy everyone was becoming without adding the extraneous drug use and gratuitous nudity.
Well, I think that's also part of Sarah Phelps's attitude towards life as well. I think it says a lot more about her, or how she perceives humanity as they're trapped in a situation. They're trapped like mice in a house full of cats, and any of them could go at any time. So, live for the moment.
I guess so. But this worked so well. This worked so well. This is our 7th, and then there were none, and it's definitely, one of the top 3.
Oh, easily.
Easily one of the top 3.
Like, as we talked about before, the Japanese productions that we've seen, and this is the 4th one, they've all been uniformly excellent.
Beautifully filmed, beautifully acted. I would appreciate them even more if we saw a really clean copy instead of whatever the Daily Motion scrapes up.
And this is going to be the last Japanese movie we're going to see unless something else comes up, and the next time we're going to go French.
Yes, we have French versions of Agatha Christie, and heaven only knows.
Yep, we're going to start with Tommy and Tuppence, called By the Pricking of My Thumbs. That's the one from 2005. I'm not going to even try to mangle the French. We've done enough damage to
Angling of the Japanese,
yes. But there's going to be that, and there's going to be some from their series, The Little Murders of Agatha Christie. At some point, we're going to see the French version of
And Then There Were None. Oh, and folks, there's also a Russian version, and, God save us, a Bollywood version from 1965. So we've got 3 more versions of And Then There Were None, and by the time we are finished, yes, we will have seen 10 versions of And Then There Were None, all different, all with their own moments of charm, although sometimes those moments are few and far between.
And we're seeing so many of them that we're giving them their own chapter in Agatha Christie She Watched, the book that we're going to be publishing next year.
And Then There Were None deserves a chapter of its own because it's so distinctive. If you've only casually read Agatha Christie and not read this novel, this is nothing like what you would expect from her. It's a grim, gritty, nihilistic novel in which everybody dies, and they deserved it. No, she doesn't write cozies.
She doesn't pull her punches.
She did not.
She was a Victorian lady, and still she wrote this. Which is just, I'm still kind of gobsmacked.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
You just wish you could have her over for dinner sometime and say, okay, let's get down to brass tacks. How did you come up with this?
just so amazing.
But instead, all we can do is watch the movies and tell you about them.
Yes, and if you were a fan of Agatha Christie, you have to watch this episode. This particular film. This is the one of the ones that you really should put on your viewing list because it is completely worth your time.
Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, if you want to read any of the first 6 books that Agatha Christie wrote, we actually published complete annotated editions with notes and essays, and they're available through PeschelPress.com. They're available through all online bookstores and even at local bookstores in the Mechanicsburg, Harrisburg area. And so until then, this is Bill Peschel.
And I'm Teresa Peschel.
And we'll see you at the movies. Agatha Christie, She Watched, is Teresa Peschel and Bill Peschel. Produced by Bill Peschel. Theme song, Call to Adventure by Kevin MacLeod. New episodes come out every week wherever you stream your content. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can help support us by going to anchor.fm/mystery and leaving a 5-star rating and review, and by helping to spread the word. To advertise on Mystery She Watched, email Peschel at peschelpress.com. All questions and comments can be emailed to Peschel at peschelpress.com. And thank you for listening.